Hello, and welcome to our first video in our video series on medical terminology. In this video, chapter number 1, we'll get an introduction to word parts and word construction. First off, the learning objectives for this video. Be able to recognize that medical terminology has both constructed and non-constructed terms. Be able to identify the three word parts that are used to construct medical terms. Those include the word roots, the prefixes, and their suffixes. Recognize that many medical terms are constructed from word parts that can be deconstructed from other word parts. And lastly, identify the function of a combining vowel that is added to a word root to form a combining form. Alright, we'll start off this chapter with constructed and non-constructed terms. And we'll first go over the differences between what is a constructed and what is a non-constructed term. We'll go over some basic strategies on how to break down and decipher some of the larger medical terms. Alright, first off, we'll talk about a constructed medical term. And all this means is when something is being constructed, say a building for example, you are taking individual pieces and making something larger. It's the same principle here. A constructed medical term is taking parts and combining them together to make one overall term. For example, pathology. The first part of that word, path or patho, means disease. And the last part of that word, logi, means the study of. So pathology literally breaks down into the study of disease, pathology. So you're taking this part plus that part, and you are constructing the overall new term of pathology. That's what constructed term means. Taking part 1 plus part 2 plus part 3 or even more and making one new term. Tonsillectomy, tonsil or tonsillo is a reference to tonsils. Ectomy is always a reference to the surgical removal of a structure. So tonsillectomy literally means the surgical removal of the tonsils. Neonatologist. Neo means new. Nate or nato means birth. And an ologist means one who studies. So a neonatologist is someone who studies newborn babies. Alright, some non-constructed terms. Now these are terms that you just have to learn. You just have to memorize. There's no way to break them down into something smaller. There's terms that you just have to know what their definition is. And these include anything from eponyms, which are either diseases or processes named after a person or people that discover them, like Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, Guillain-Barré disease. Those are named after people. So there's no way to break those terms down. You just have to know what that name is a reference to. These can also include terms derived from other languages, acronyms. You'll see that a lot, especially when we talk about hormones in particular, and also abbreviations. The key to this type of term is it can't be broken down. It has to be memorized. It has to be learned. Some common examples of non-constructed terms. Impetigo, which is a skin disease. There's no way to break that down. There is no root word here. There is no suffix or prefix here. It's just that word, impetigo. You just have to know what that term references. Coma, or a comatose state. Cushing syndrome, that's named after a researcher who discovered and first described this collection of symptoms. So these are all examples among countless others that are non-constructed terms. You just have to know what they mean. All right, here's a good graphic to illustrate the difference between a constructed and non-constructed term. For a constructed term, you're taking this part plus that part plus that part to getting one new complete word. But for a non-constructed term, this is something you just have to know what it references. Alright, now we'll go over the word parts of a medical term. There are three primary types of word parts. You have the prefix, which is the beginning part of a word, the word root, which is the main part of the medical term, and then the ending, which is the suffix. Now, not every medical term will have all three of those word parts. Many medical terms will have more than one root word, so it's being able to recognize what certain prefixes mean, what certain suffixes mean, what certain word roots mean. And some medical terms are made simply by adding just a prefix or just a suffix. And then a fourth word element of a medical term is the combining vowel. We'll talk about that more. It seems like a lot, and we'll go over a lot of word roots, a lot of prefixes, a lot of suffixes, not only in this video, but through the series of videos for this course. But a lot of these you will see more commonly than others. So you should be able to recognize some just by experience. Another good thing about prefixes and suffixes and word roots, their definitions never ever change. It doesn't matter if you're talking about the reproductive system or the nervous system or the digestive system. What their definitions are won't change just because you're talking about another body system or another body organ. Alright, here's a general image of the human body with many of the combining forms. See, cephalo or cephal was reference to head. Auto is reference to ear. Angio is reference to vessel. Broncho, airways. Musculo for muscles. Pod or podo is reference to foot. Osteo, bone. Gastro, stomach. Cardio, heart. Tracheo, trachea. Oculo for eye. And encephalo, brain. And of course, there are thousands more, but these are some very, very common areas of the body that you'll see referenced. Alright, now we'll talk about the combining form. And the most common combining vowel that you'll see is the letter O. Now, a combining vowel is what will connect a word root with a suffix that begins with a consonant. And this is really just to make the word sound better, make it flow more naturally. That's the reason why these examples here, podo or osteo, gastro, cardio, they're connecting the word root to a suffix. It really is to make it sound more phonetically pleasing. Now, some constructed medical terms will use combining vowels to unite two word roots also. Alright, now we'll talk about the origin of medical terms. Now, most medical terms will come either from Latin or from Greek. So if it feels like you're learning a totally new language when you're going over these terms, you literally are. You're learning Greek and Latin terms. The ancient Greeks are considered the fathers of modern medicine, and the Romans advanced medicine with their own experiments and their own observations and added Latin terms to the growing body of the Greek terms in medical language. Now, sometimes the origins of medical terms are a relation to history or to poetry or to mythology, geography or physical objects or even ideas. Here's the father of medicine, Hippocrates. When doctors complete med school, they take the Hippocratic Oath, and that's a reference to this man, Hippocrates. Here's a table of some common word roots from Greek and Latin. For example, the root lith is from lithos, which is Greek, which means stone. So a common example of that would be cholelithiasis. These are having gallstones. The prefix chole or chol is reference to the gallbladder. Lith is reference to stones. And iasis is the condition of. So the condition of having gallstone. Maxim is from the Latin maximus, which means the biggest or the highest. And a common example, the gluteus maximus, the biggest muscle in the buttocks. The word root derm is from the Greek derma, which is reference to skin. And a common example of that would be dermatitis, which is the inflammation of the skin. One we talked about earlier, path, is from the Greek pathos, which is a reference to disease. And a common example of that would be pathogen. This is anything that causes disease, which is a very generic term, which could mean a virus or a bacterium or a fungal spore. So anything that causes a disease is called a pathogen. Now, a prefix usually requires no change to it when another word part joins it to form a brand new term. It's usually only with suffixes where you need a combining vowel to make the word sound more phonetically pleasing, but prefixes usually aren't changed. Alright, now we'll go over some common prefixes and some examples. The first one, anti. This means against. So an antibody in your immune system is something that will fight against other bodies that are making you sick. Brady means slow or slower. So someone who has bradycardia has a slower heart rate than they should. Endo means inside. So the endometrium is the innermost lining of the uterus. Epi means above. Like your epidermis is the level of skin above the dermis, so the one that you see, the epidermis. Neo means new. So a neonatal unit in a hospital would be the newborn babies. And pre means before. So if you've ever had, say, surgery, for example, you usually have pre-op or preoperative testing or preoperative treatment. So before the operation, pre-op. Alright, now we'll go over some word roots plus the combining vowel. The append or appendo, the appendix. So the word root would be append, but then you add the O so it will flow more naturally with the suffix that combines with it. Bi would mean two. Bio is a reference to life, like biology, the study of life. Cardi and cardio reference to the heart. Cerebro, reference to the cerebrum, part of the brain. And dermato is reference to the skin. Right, what we'll do now is we'll focus on the term dermato. So you can see how words are combined with their word root and their suffix. For example, we start with dermato, or the word root. If you add the suffix logi, that means the study of. So dermato means skin, logi means the study of. So dermatology would mean the study of the skin. An example of a constructed term, taking the word root plus the suffix to get a brand new term, dermatology. Right, some other word roots and their combining vowels. Electro is reference to electricity, such as the electrical activity of the brain or of the heart. Encephalo is reference to the brain. Gastro is reference to the stomach. Hemo is reference to blood. And hepato is reference to the liver. Hystero is reference to the uterus. So a hysterectomy is the removal, either partial or complete removal of the uterus. Laryngo refers to the larynx or the voice box. Leuco is reference to white, such as a leukocyte is a white blood cell. And the last two on here, mammo and masto, are both a reference to breast. So it just depends on what type of term that you're using. But both of these terms will reference the breast. Like a mammogram, a test that will help scan for breast cancer. Mastectomy, removal of the breast. So they are both reference to the same general item. Alright, some other word roots and their combining vowels. The first one, ment or mento, is reference to the chin. Nate or nato is reference to birth. So a neonatal unit. New, birth. Neuro is reference to nerves. Patho is one we talked about earlier, disease. And procto is reference to the rectum. So a proctologist is someone who studies the rectum and their diseases. What we'll do now is we'll focus on this one word root here, neuro. So neuro is reference to nerve. If you were to add the suffix itis, which means inflammation of, you get neuritis, inflammation of a nerve. So again, another example of a constructed term. Word root plus another part, the suffix, gives you a brand new term, neuritis, inflammation of a nerve. The term psych or psycho is reference to the mind. So a psychologist is someone who studies the mind. Rhine or rhino is reference to nose. So think of the nose on a rhinoceros. So a procedure called rhinoplasty is a surgical repair of the nose, a technical term for a nose job. Tonsil or tonsillo, referenced earlier in the video, reference to the tonsils. And vase or vaso is reference to vessels. Alright, now we'll go over some common suffixes. See the first one, the ending al. This means pertaining to. So for example, abdominal is a pertaining to the abdomen. Ectomy is the surgical removal of. So an appendectomy, removal of the appendix. Tonsillectomy, removal of the tonsils. Emia is reference to of the blood. See the next one, the suffix gram. This is often confused with the suffix graph. Sometimes people tend to use those interchangeably, but they are two separate suffixes. They mean two different things. The ending gram is a record, so a recording of something. So a mammogram is the actual record of that test. An electrocardiogram is the actual piece of paper with those little spikes and valleys of the electrical activity of the heart. It's an actual recording. And the last one on the slide, ia, is a condition. Leukemia, for example. Some more suffixes. The suffix iatry is a reference to the medical treatment. Psychiatry is a medical treatment of the mind. The suffix ic means pertaining to. So gastric is pertaining to the stomach. Itis is the inflammation of. The suffix logis, the person who studies. So a biologist is someone who studies bio or life. And the suffix logi means the study of. So cardiology, the study of the heart, it's cardio. A cardiologist is the professional who studies the heart. See, the suffix pathy means disease. Like a pathogen is something that causes disease. Philia means loving. So hydrophilia is a structure that will love water. Plasty means the surgical repair of. The one we talked about earlier, rhinoplasty, the surgical repair of the nose. See, the suffix scope means an instrument that's used to look at. And the suffix tic, tic, means pertaining to. Like hepatic Hepa means the liver. So hepatic means pertaining to the liver. And going back to the term scope, add that to the root word proct or procto. Procto again means the rectum or the anus, and scope means the instrument used for viewing. So a proctoscope is an instrument that's used to view the rectum or the anus, which will be used by a proctologist. Again, another example of a constructed term. Root word plus suffix to give you a brand new word. Alright, a quick summary of what we talked about in this video. Medical terms are deciphered by breaking them into word parts, and then defining first the suffix, and then the prefix, and then the word root, or the combining forms. There are three main parts to a medical term. The prefix, the part before the word root or its combining form, and then the suffix. And not every medical term will have all three parts. Alright, here's a quick combining form quiz. On the left you have 5 different examples we talked about. Bi or bio, gastro, masto, hepato, and vaso. And each of these will combine to just one of these. So either breast, liver, vessel, life, or stomach. So for the first one, bio is a reference to the life, such as biology. Second one, gastro, is a reference to the stomach. Masto, reference to the breast. Hepato, reference to the liver. And vaso, reference to vessel. So here are the answers to this very brief quiz on the terms we talked about today. And again, it'll be very difficult to go over every single possible combination of word roots and their combining forms plus their suffixes or prefixes. This is really no way to go over every possible combination that exists. But by knowing some very commonly used word roots, very commonly used prefixes, very commonly used suffixes, breaking down these very large, cumbersome medical terms does get a lot easier. And again, the key is to all of these definitions will never ever change. Now, vaso will always mean vessel. Hepato is always going to mean a reference to the liver. That doesn't change because you're talking about a male or female or someone young or someone old. These terms never ever change their definitions, which makes this a lot easier. Alright, that brings us to the end of our first video in our video series on medical terminology, and we will continue with our video on chapter number 2.